Good day, TV historians, and happy anniversary. That's right, every midsummer for the past 7 years, it dawns on me that Advanced TV Herstory is another year older. So in this episode, I will touch briefly on this past year of content that we've produced, the look ahead at what I'm hoping I might be able to cover as a topic or an interview, and the state of TV as I see it, which is, just where I've sat in this podcast chair for the last now 7 complete years. We're starting year 8. But before I begin, I'd like to offer a big thank you to Catherine Yang, my audio producer, very, very talented woman who makes my voice sound great in your ears. Catherine also magically blends the intro music, which is called Take Me Higher by an artist named Jazzer, into each and every episode. So if you're dreaming of starting your own podcast, go to Free Music Archive and explore the jingles and the mood music for every occasion. It's just kind of a fun sound shopping experience. freemusicarchive.org. Now, since last summer, podcasts have become a more powerful force than we ever may have predicted. Podcasting is still a bit of a wild west of free speech, we know that, but Spotify was in the spotlight for many, many months as the big money deal with Joe Rogan caused heads to spin. I'm not going to go into detail, but you may know that Rogan is known as a flamethrower, and I'm not going to give him any more time here, but to just simply synopsize, go ahead and Google Joe Rogan and you'll find out the controversy, but it comes down to Spotify retaining Rogan for an absurd amount of money to do podcasts so that they could then increase their paid Spotify platform. His content and that amount of money prompted all sorts of artists and podcasters to remove their work from Spotify. Advanced TV Herstory is available free from Spotify, and you do not have to be a premium account holder to listen to it if you listen to podcasts on Spotify. And Spotify does not charge me to have them distribute my podcast. But there were people who were trying to unplug their content from Spotify, and it's not an easy thing to do. I chose to keep Advanced TV Herstory on the platform, largely because while I've never supported their decision to pay Mr. Rogan a handsome fee for spewing hatred, their distribution of this podcast costs me nothing and costs you nothing to listen to it. Our messages educate, inspire, and celebrate. And I can only be so selective about distribution because I want to make it into your ears. I want to be on your playlist. You won't find Advanced TV Herstory, however, on Amazon podcasts because of the terms and conditions that Amazon requires of its content creators. I don't buy from Amazon. I rarely shop at Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon. I really believe in shopping local and in person whenever I can. One last item about distribution. Are you old enough to remember either taking your child to the video store on Friday night, or perhaps even being taken there as a kid yourself? Access to video was a novelty experience by my generation, those of us in our 50s, because the movies that never made it into the rerun rotation of the small cable channel spectrum, or the few TV series that were considered classic enough that they were produced onto VHS, you could go there and browse and read the liner notes, as it were, the little marketing blurb, and you got to watch the stuff that otherwise you couldn't get to. My concern here is that when we're talking about TV consumption and media consumption, that we all have some absolute favorite movies, the classic holiday movies, TV series that you just loved. Please consider buying them in DVD, even if it's a used DVD. You cannot count on streaming to have it available on demand forever. I'm going to talk about this actually later in this episode as well. Because fewer and fewer companies own most of what Hollywood has produced for the last 90 years. There are big gates that separate us from the medium and the content that we love. Now, if you think about it, the law of supply and demand sort of dictates that your favorites won't often show up as often, perhaps, as they have in the past, as free on any of your preferred streaming services on a Friday night, or on your Xfinity On Demand, or whatever your cable source is. They put some out there, but not always the good ones, and not the film noir, not the Alfred Hitchcocks. Just remember that DVD players are crazy small these days. I mean, they're about the size of an iPad. Hedge your bet, own the shows and the movies that bring you comfort so that on a Friday night after a big box of pizza, you can enjoy what you want to enjoy. I put that plug in because you just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring and how expensive it might cost to watch your favorite stuff. This past year, I conducted interviews about the FX channel series The Americans, and that was a series that seems to be so eerily close to the truth. I just don't think anybody thought that it was possible. I still can't bring myself to watch too many episodes of it, but I did enjoy the conversation. Go back and listen if you haven't. Also, I interviewed Shayla Lawson, and we talked about Diana Ross's 1983 concert in Central Park and how important the representation that Diana Ross had in that concert, which is not readily viewed. You're best off getting a DVD if you can. You're going to pay a price for that. But it's a phenomenal piece of TV herstory that I can't stop talking about. Rest assured, listeners, however, that I will always read the entire book that is written by the author that I'm going to interview. And usually I purchase the book on my own because they're in the business to sell books. It's true. They've put in a tremendous amount of work to even write that book and have it accepted for publication. I'm not going to stand around and wait for a free copy. Another episode, I think my favorite from this past season, came to me after witnessing the kerfuffle following Liza Minnelli's appearance at this year's Academy Awards ceremony. I truly wanted to understand how much and what kind of TV Liza did in her career, because she's sort of frozen in time. She's frozen in a film career that had its ups and its downs. And in general, her entire career she peaked early. She was 26, and that was her year, 1972-ish. But I'm proud of that episode because I learned a lot, and I have a new appreciation of her talent. And if after doing something as I have done for 6 or 7 or 8 years now, I still find myself learning a lot, then I know that there's still a lot to be shared with you in the years to come here on Advanced TV Herstory. So you ask, what is in store this coming year, Cynthia? Quite likely, as I conduct research for 2 different books, I'll encounter material that is worthy of an episode. But also I find myself watching an old episode of Sybil or Murder, She Wrote or Bones, and a question or plot line catches my attention. And those are the little rabbit holes that I like to run down and then quickly deliver something to you as thought-provoking and perhaps gets you engaged with a series you hadn't thought about. When podcasting grew so immensely 6 years ago, podcasts themselves were produced by fans and even the series themselves to provide a great and informed scrutiny and discussion of TV series and actors and all of it. I mean, everybody's got a podcast now, and every series, for the most part, either has a fan-produced podcast or one that is attached to the show itself. So I will just remind you that I steer clear of the popular and the saturated. If you're looking for insights into Downton Abbey, search your podcatcher or just search Google, and I'm fairly certain you'll find an official or an armchair expert who's produced some really fine episodes. They have the perspective, they've watched the series 1,000 times. The exception to my policy, however, is that if I am able to ever book an expert, usually an expert who has authored a book, I do so. And it happens every once in a while, and at that point in time, I do get a little more into the depth of the series, if I can find it. Yes, we're all a little exhausted because of the tremendous change we've been living through these past 6 or 7 years. Streaming services deliver excellent content. They are pretty much the ones cleaning up when it comes to the awards ceremonies lately. But the corporate decisions and the financial viability of what's going on right now in the entire industry leaves us in a far different situation than it was back in TV's olden days, when the big 3 networks plus PBS plus an independent channel simply ran old movies and they delivered the quality content with commercials. New services are opening for business as others get bought up by global corporations who may or may not have any real interest in your favorite shows or movies. Let me stress that, because we just don't know what tomorrow will bring. And while there are some people who hoard food and survival items, my survival items are my DVD collection. But I still am watching new stuff as well. My current viewing, however, is skewed as all of this streaming opportunity is available. I'm inclined to watch more Canadian and British series than I am American. There's just not that much on. I'm not keeping up with all of those who are really on the major networks these days. I do try to watch WNBA games when I can, and I will always slow down my channel surfing or my guide surfing for women's golf, tennis, or soccer. And I just have to remind you that when we watch women's sports on TV with anybody else in the room, of any age, we are underscoring representation. We are modeling it. In person or on TV, there is a different air to women in competition. Representation. I will just close by saying that when I started this podcast, Advanced TV Herstory, I had to explain the concept of representation. It was that foreign to us. We couldn't see what we couldn't see. And I don't mean that in the TV sense. I mean that from a not being aware as white people. I recognize that all of my listeners of color have been much more in tuned and understanding representation their entire lives. But white women need to have it explained in the course of That Girl or Charlie's Angels, Chris Everett or Billie Jean King, seeing somebody who was like you on TV. But these crazy 6, 7, 8 years, that has changed because we explained, and I explained over and over, that as a society and a media industry that was run by white men, they had never even considered the value to a viewer of a viewer seeing him or herself. We watched what they served up. But slowly we came to realize how we feel when we see people like us on TV doing cool things or being productive, respected members of society being interviewed on a news show. Even more so than film, TV's capacity to truly represent people is almost infinite. We're smarter, more outspoken consumers than we ever were just a few years ago, and to the degree that streaming has helped break that open, yay. I can only say yay. That's where we are. 7 entire years of podcasting. We're opening up season 8. I sure hope you'll be along for the ride. The best way to stay in touch with me on news and activities is to subscribe to my e-newsletter, sign up at tvherstory.com or at Cynthia Bemis Abrams. That's all one word, CynthiaBemisAbrams.com. There is no advertising, no selling, and your email is not shared with anyone. It comes up whenever I'm able to produce it, usually every 4 to 6 weeks. Whether you are a long-time listener or only recently found Advanced TV Herstory, thank you for listening. I really mean that. You have many choices for listening, and I am proud every time someone tells me they enjoyed an episode. After all, you're why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.